Yeah, it's really good to see you. It's been a while since we met a few years ago and over in Fort Worth, and yeah, I'm excited to have you on here. So I've already interviewed you on my entrepreneurship podcast, but I kind of wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the fitness world with you,
Yep.
because you're obviously tell everyone who you are. You're Coach Tim Adams. You've coached a billion people, and let's just kind of hear it.
Yeah. So been in sports and human performance for the last 30 plus years,
Mhm.
which is kind of crazy. I got recruited to play football for the Air Force Academy, tore up my knee. I went to the prep school for a year. That's how smart I was. I actually had to take a red shirt year to get into the academy. Tore up my knee that Christmas break. Went home. Kind of grew up, born in Indiana, but grew up in Colorado, and went home to ski with my buddies. Tore
Mhm.
my ACL, and funny enough, being wheeled into the Stedman Hawkins operating room, and a nurse comes running down. Stop! You can't touch him. He's government property. So I got sent back down to the academy and had my surgery done. And that following year, as a freshman at the academy, tried to play, and during basic training, climbing a rope, and my knee dislocated at the top of the rope. My graft failed, and
Mhm.
that was the beginning of 5 knee surgeries. And so, but what happened was, since I couldn't play football, I got cut that spring, because I basically practiced every other practice, and my knee would dislocate. And I'd have a
Yeah.
buddy pull my knee, because at the academy, if you
God.
tell somebody that if you have a surgery on 2 joints, I was told you get medically disqualified. I didn't know for sure. But anyway, I'm making this a way long story. Sorry, but
No, you're good. Yeah.
what happened was, um, I just wanted to be part of the team. I wanted to help. I wanted to do something, and so I was pretty good at Olympic lifting. And I asked the strength coach if they needed a cadet coach, and so I
Mhm.
became a student coach, and that's how I got into coaching. It was like, really an organic way of, like, one, not wanting to not be part of a team, and two,
Mhm.
just helping out at something I was pretty just good at. And then that led to, I started competing, and because I started competing, I started going down to the Olympic Training Center, because obviously the best Olympic
Yeah, absolutely.
weightlifting coach we had was Dragomir. And so I went down, and I started learning from him, and that just kind of continued throughout my career. I just had this really penchant for wanting to help others.
Mhm.
And it started out in the weight room, and then from the weight room, I got into doing soft tissue therapy. I got certified in active release technique, and I was horrible at it. In fact, there's guys that some of my old players that still have scars from what I did to them.
When you were still learning.
When I was still,
Yeah.
yeah, when I was still learning,
Yeah.
it was, and the funny thing was, is like, I had a line of like 50 guys out the weight room door, and the strength coach would come over and go, Tim, what are you doing? And I'm like, hey, isn't it great? They're practicing now, they're lifting now, and all this stuff. And he's like, yeah, but you're not coaching. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
so
Exactly.
and then that was kind of the beginning of my this understanding of how compartmentalized um, sport had become at that time. And
Mhm.
this was back in the 90s, and or late, I guess that would have been, yeah, 90s, late 90s. And every time I learned something new, a new technique, so from the weight room, I learned manual, like soft tissue therapy, and then that changed the way I approached my weight room. I was like, oh, well, because I'm doing X, Y, and Z, it's causing A, B, and C. Well,
Yeah.
maybe I should shift what I'm doing. And so I started changing my programming.
Well, one thing I wanted to say, and we'll kind of like summarize that up. But like, what's crazy about what you were talking about is that I feel like it applies to business too. Like when I discover a new like branding technique, I'll have to look back and be like, okay, well this I have to change everything now because this one thing taught me everything else. So, and I feel like training is probably even worse because you're like, oh, that's how this muscle works, and then you're like,
Yeah.
oh, we should not be benching that way. It's like,
Well,
yeah,
so much so, right? And I feel the same way about business because I'm learning. That's my focus right now is to build my
mm-hmm,
business a different way, and I'm creating some programs at the moment. But it's like I was a strength coach, and
mm-hmm,
it was so funny. You know, uh, so I start out as a strength coach, and I did have at least the wherewithal to say, hey, I need to go get some education if I'm going to be a strength
mm-hmm,
coach. Just because I'm good at something doesn't mean I know what I'm doing. And
yeah,
so I went and I got a master's in exercise science, and funny enough, even
no big
after,
deal.
well, yeah, it was no big deal. But even after I got my master's, I
Yeah,
still didn't understand anatomy, and I didn't have that great of an anatomy background because even when I got certified in this active release, my anatomy was horrible,
mm-hmm,
and it forced me to start to learn because one of my first major clients I had was a 10-year vet in the NFL, and he knew anatomy better than most anybody that worked on him, and he
yeah,
challenged me every day, and I was like, holy smokes. And it's so funny because then he excuse my language, he'd F with people I'd work with him, and it was like, well, can you work on my quadratus femoris? And everybody'd go to the rectus femoris, and he's like, do you not even know where the quadratus femoris is? And
yeah,
it was kind of funny because there like some really good practitioners, they were like, what are you talking about? And so
mm-hmm,
it really forced me to get to this understanding of the mechanics, the function, and then how does everything relate and interact. And that's where my mind just started kind of being blown, like expanding, and then and the way my mind works is about integration, about this, like you had said, this nuance of when you learn something, how
mm-hmm,
it changes your perspective on what is. And
mm-hmm,
way my mind works, it's very integrative, and for me, it's like I I'm a slow learner, literally, because it takes time for me to process how things are interconnected, and
mm-hmm,
I can't quite grasp things until I can then see that connection. But the moment I have the connection,
yeah,
I actually understand that concept probably better than the person teaching it, because then
mm-hmm,
now I see it from more holistic approach.
mm-hmm,
And most people are so segmented, so compartmentalized in what they do. And I can't tell you how many times in my career I was told, stay in your lane, know your
mm-hmm,
role. And I'd be like, dude, I'm helping the players. I thought that's what this whole organization was about. Like
yeah,
getting a better product out on the field. But if I need to know my role and stay in my lane, then that's not going to happen. Like, it doesn't make sense to
mm-hmm,
me. And so I have this contrarian and counterculture and almost go against the grain approach, which um, certainly labeled me a maverick and outcast for quite
mm-hmm,
some time, and and uh, and 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 yet it's built my career, and it's
yeah,
why I think I get the results I get, and why um, I charge what I charge, is because I do
mm-hmm,
get those results. And that's been something that I just, from the very beginning of my career, I just knew if I kept learning that um, the money would come. That
yeah,
if I can understand what's going on, and just because, and I can't tell you too how many people would tell me, like, Tim, when's enough? Like, don't you
yeah,
know enough already? And I'm like, well, if I don't understand this concept, then apparently I have more to learn.
mm-hmm,
And I still learn to this day. And that's the beautiful piece. My focus might switch to different things like business or that part of what I do, um, but I'm still learning, and
mm-hmm,
I love that. And I think, for those listening on this podcast, I think learning is this quest to learn is might be one of your biggest skills to develop.
Yeah.
in my opinion. Because when you're open to learning, then that means you're open to new ideas and you're open to new perspectives. And if you can be open to a new perspective, then you can always see from someone else's shoes. You can always have empathy because of that. And I think that's probably one of the problems that we're having in the country to this day, is that we just have a hard time with other people's perspective because we can't see it. So anyway, not to go down that road.
Yeah. So it's another 2 hours, but I agree. I mean, people are super close-minded, so that's our country. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I mean, your career is so crazy. I feel like people are paying a lot of money to fly you around the world to train them. I mean, like you've told me about people that literally fly you across the world so you can train them for one day, and then just
Yeah.
to as you put it, put your hands on them and then fly home. I mean,
Yeah.
that's, I mean, how do you even get to that point? I mean, like it seems like,
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I sit there and like, it didn't start this way by any means, right? And
yeah,
I was saying earlier, like when I started, and this is something, for those that are starting out in this industry to know, is like, you got to take your reps. Like,
hmm
just because you read a book, don't kid yourself. You're not an expert. Like,
yeah,
just because you graduated with a master's degree or even a PhD, you're not an expert. Like,
hmm
you are book smart at what you do, or you're clinically smart at what you do. But in terms of what the world is providing or offering or presenting to you, you got a lot to learn. And so
hmm
for the young coaches that are coming out, and I was that way too. Look, I was that way. I was like, I used to look at these other coaches and say, "Oh my God, that guy doesn't know what he's doing." And then and I'd be like, he's not a good coach. And then I'd be in that situation and I'd be going, oh my gosh, what that guy was doing was brilliant. Because
yeah,
now I understood why he was doing what he was doing. And in all fairness, like when I'd go to learn from someone, like I didn't want their programs. Like, and it was so funny
hmm
because, I had this conversation with somebody recently. It was like, I never went to a strength coach or, someone who was a researcher or whatever, the best in the world of what they did, and ask for their results. I wanted to know, how did they think? Like, what were
hmm
they thinking when they produced that? Like, I wanted to understand their thought process. And, and by doing that, I completely changed the way I thought. And it took years off my coaching. And what I was trying to share with you too is like, I I had originally sent out all these resumes to the NFL thinking somebody to at least give me a sniff. And funny, no, I didn't get one response. Like, nobody. It was crickets. I didn't even get a
yeah,
response back. And I thought, well, being from the Air Force Academy, graduating from the Air Force Academy, coaching at the Air Force Academy, somebody would be like, oh, for sure they'd want me. And that wasn't the case. So that's when I learned about movement and speed. And so
hmm
in May of '98, I embarked on speed, started learning from Charlie Francis. In that summer, a kid named Obadiah Thompson broke the world record. His coach was Dan Paff. And I was like, oh, I need to find and learn from Dan Paff. Dan was coaching at University of Texas at the time, and I was still working with the Air Force Academy guys. And I was at the field house, and we have an indoor track, and they had an all-comers track meet there, and University of Texas was there. And so I'm working with my guys in the corner before the track meet started, and I see this guy with a Longhorn shirt on, and I make a beeline for him. I'm like, where's Dan Paff? And he looks at me and he goes like, why? I go, well, he's the best speed coach in the world, and look at those guys in the corner. Like, I'm trying to teach him how to do speed, and I just started learning from Charlie Francis, and I really don't know what I'm doing, and blah blah blah. And he looks out there and goes, yeah, they need help. And I go, well, see, so where's Dan? And he goes, well, you're talking to him. And we hit it off, and he invites me down to the University of Houston the following week. And so he introduced me to Tom Tellez. And so in the matter of like 3 months, I met Charlie Francis, Dan Paff, and Tom Tellez. And in the 1988 Olympics, Charlie Francis had Ben Johnson, who won the gold, but then it was taken away because of steroids. Carl Lewis Tom Tellez coached, and he ended up getting the gold. And then the two other sprinters in that Olympics were coached by Dan Path. And Dan's had multiple world records / gold medals, whatever. And so I started learning from him. And so in March of 99, the Denver Broncos call me and say, hey, can you come do our off-season speed training? So in less than a year, I created not only a competence in speed, I created a name for myself locally, at least, to get the opportunity to now do something that I was trying to get the opportunity for. They sought me out. So it's really, so again, when you learn from the best, you accelerate your learning, one, and then two, when you get results, people knock on your door. And so over the last 30 years, my results have just, and I say my results, the results I've helped my clients acquire have been consistent, and they've been reproducible. Like, it wasn't one time that I got a good result. It wasn't 2 times that I got lucky. Like, I've been doing this for 33 years, and every year I've been creating these reproducible results. So, there's something to that, right? Like, when you can almost guarantee that you can help somebody improve their performance, then you're in a different position than if you're guessing. And so, and when you, and so the other piece of this that I'll share is, like, if you look at a bell curve, a lot of people that don't know what they're doing think that you can give everybody from a high school kid to a pro athlete the same programming and get the same results. And again, 68 whatever percent of the population, that's probably pretty fair to say. But I've been working in what I call the outliers, right? Like the tip of the spear. And you can't do the same thing for every single person at the tip of the spear. It's not. Everybody.
You can't take the best athletes in the world and like make them 80% better. Like, it's like.
Yeah, and so, like, and the funny thing is if you can create a massive improvement at the tip of the spear, imagine what you could do at the massive.
Exactly.
It's like, you can pretty much tell you can pretty much send a high school kid off and go do whatever he wants to do, and he's going to get better just because he's got so much testosterone in him. He's going to improve. It doesn't really matter what you tell him to do. He's going to improve. But with proper programming, the variance, that change in how you can improve, is significantly more, right? So it's like, but when you're at the tip, like the amount of change becomes harder and harder to get. You're like squeezing, the little last bit out of the improvement. And sometimes you can make really big improvement, because the crazy thing is, a lot of people at that tip, shockingly, don't do or haven't done a lot of fundamental work, and that gets into a whole nother realm of hacking and shortcuts and silver bullets, which I'm not a fan of. But anyway, so to really answer your question, like how did I get to where I'm at, and how can I charge what I charge? To me, it goes back to I'm never ending learning and constantly improving, and I've created, like, consistently reproducible results. And then the other piece of it is too, it's like there comes a point in time where you kind of say, is this worth my time to do? And then you sometimes throw out just a really big number, and they're like, oh, okay. And then the number.
No, we just interviewed a celebrity trainer last week, and he was talking about how, like, he had always trained people for free just to get connections and that kind of stuff. And then one day, one of his business coaches was like, he was training a celebrity, and the coach goes, ask him or tell him it's going to be $40K for 1 month. And he goes, what? And then he told him, and the guy's like, all right, he just did it. So, I mean, it's crazy.
It is crazy. And so, I and the funny thing is like my rate is multiplied 100x compared to when I started. Like when I first was charging people when I got out of the Air Force Academy to where I'm at now. It's 100x what it was. And
just imagining what that what that is.
so
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And yet at the same time, it's not like I'm booked 24/7 either, right? So
Yeah.
that's the other piece of it, because I'm building out a new program. I'm doing some different things, and it gives me the freedom to be with my boys. Gives me the freedom to do other things that I really want to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so yeah. So anyway.
So when you're at that point, like, I mean, I guess it is kind of like, if you had to drop your price by 20% and get more clients, it just wouldn't even be worth it for you just because
It's yeah, and then here's the other piece of it too. And it's funny because like, if I'm going into a new, and I've done this, if there's a skill set I'm not so comfortable with,
mm-hmm.
I'll drop my prices in that realm
Mm-hmm.
until I create a competence in it, and then I'll pop it back up. So
yeah.
And I don't mind. And here's the other piece of it too, is like, I'll do pro bono work, like, and I do charity work too. And like, I mentor some college kids that are in so I mentor these sports psychologists. They're in the sports psychology program, and I'm not a sports psychologist, but I do a lot of mental conditioning stuff. And so I'm mentoring these kids for free, right? And I just got, I was on the phone with one of them yesterday, and I was like, I keep just being blown away that the education is not given, like, sure, they're learning a lot of fundamental stuff, but in terms of being able to have just that practical, applicable, concept of how to make change, like, it's like they don't get it, and they're not being taught it. And I just scratch my head because it's not rocket science. But anyway, sorry, I don't even know. I got lost on that.
No, you're good. We're both ranters, so I'm on that. I do the same thing.
Yeah.
Wait, so what advice do you have for personal trainers or strength coaches that are just starting out? Like, they just got certified, they just got their degree, whatever they're doing. Like, what advice do you have for them? Like, first steps?
Well, like I said earlier, like, constantly be learning. Like, take time out of your day to learn, but then take time out of your month to go learn. Like, I'm a big fan of learning from the best, but I'm a big fan of like being like in the space of being able to see, being able to watch, being able to be critiqued by someone who is exceptional at what they do. And
like, train with a better trainer, basically, kind of thing.
Yeah, you're either training with a better trainer or you're watching the coach, because when you start to there's a different language that the best coaches use. There's a different rhythm to how they coach. Like, I remember when I first started out in speed, I would give my guys like 5, 6, 7 cues, and I'm like, you gotta do this, and they look at me like a deer in a headlight, and then they just go do it, and I'd be like, great, and then come back and do and now I'd be like, if I say anything, because it's like, because there's this, I'll give them a cue, and then it's like, all right, I let their body kind of assimilate that cue, and then get the reps to kind of normalize it, and then give them another cue. But when I was younger, I just over flooded them with cues, and there's no learning going on then. There's too much confusion, and when they get into their head, then they can't reproduce the result. And so I think when you learn from a great coach, you start, and you're observable enough, you and again, if you're going to coach, you have to have observation skills. So what better way to get those than to watch a great coach? But then the other piece that I'd say is take the reps, like, get the reps. And I don't care how you get the reps. Like, you may have to give away your business, your service to get reps. But if you're not getting the reps, you're not refining your skill set. You got to sharpen your sword. And so even if it's with, I've worked with 6-year-old kids all the way up to 98-year-old grandmothers and or great grandmothers probably, and actually 92, not 98, 92-year-old grandmother,
Fair enough.
and everything in between, right? But my sweet spot is Ben, pro athletes or Olympians. Okay.
Boom. Cool.
Yeah. So the second thing I'd say for the young kids would be like, learn something outside your comfort zone. Like learn something different, because whatever you learn that's different, it's going to change your perspective. And when you change your perspective, whatever it is that you're really good at is going to get better.
Yeah, absolutely. So you recommend like getting a bunch of certifications, or just like reading a bunch of books, or like kind of all of the above? Like,
yeah, all the above.
yeah.
I'm not, and let me how do I say this? So if you know what you want to do, then I would be getting the certifications and the books around what it is that you ultimately want to do. So if you know it's sport, I wouldn't be going to get group fitness certification stuff.
Yeah.
It would be, all right, movement and weightlifting and things that are going to be more, maybe even analytics, maybe even the technology side of it too. Like there's just so many different avenues that you can go down today that weren't even an option when I started.
Yeah.
So, and I think, again, for me, if you can get a taste of all of these different disciplines, better for you. Like, because now you can not only speak their language, you can see how everything is integrated and interrelated. And I just think that that's missing. I think if you're a strength coach, if you're a trainer, even if you're an athletic trainer, and you're so focused on what you do in your lane, you miss how it integrates to the whole system. Because if you think about it, we're all systems. Our body is a system made up of a multitude of different systems, and every organization is a system made up of different systems. And so if we don't know how to integrate together, then it's very compartmentalized, and then it won't function freely. It'll be clunky.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I love like hearing you talk, because it brings me back to when we first met at Fort Worth, and Nancy wanted me and you to lead a circuit class, and I thankfully she didn't force me, and I was like, no, I'm okay, like, 'cause I'm like I understand training, but like at a very lower level. And then you come out and you're like, you showed me how to lunge properly, like based on my mechanics that were off. Then I still to this day lunge. Like I don't use lunge or weights for my lunges because of you. Like I do like just pure form and just do like tons of reps. And it was just crazy because I was like, yeah, I should not be in the same room as this guy, let alone like leading up to, or like like she wanted me to follow your class, like do a class afterwards. And I'm like, what do you want me to do? Like push-ups and stuff. Like it would have been, I think about it all the time, because it would have been it's probably the most cringeworthy thing I can think of that didn't happen. But I think of like what it would have been like to have you watching me before we met teach a class that you should have been teaching. So
it's funny, and then that's the other piece of all of this, right? Is like there's no judgment in any of that, right? Like, and
yeah,
well, but yeah, it's like And then that's the other thing I would say to someone starting. It's like, the one thing I get a feel for some of these young coaches is that they think they already know it all.
Yeah.
And if you have that mentality and you can't learn from somebody that's in front of you, then you probably are going to have a short career.
Mm-hmm.
And you can fool a lot of people, but you're not going to fool the best. And when you get in front of the best, you're going to get found out. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's pretty apparent. So, for me, I like to learn from everybody. And I think any opportunity, and there was a time in my career where, like, I had that arrogance. And if somebody was wasting my time, oh man, I let them know. And it came back to bite me, which was interesting. And that's a lesson that I had to get, right? Like, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I gotta treat everybody fairly. And even if they don't respecting my time, doesn't mean I need to disrespect them with their time.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think that applies to business too. I mean, I feel like I'm constantly like acting like I know everything, and then it's like, okay, well, you definitely don't. You need to shut up and listen to this person talk. So I totally agree. So what are you working on now? I think were you working on a book last time we talked, something like that? You were doing something like in that
Yeah.
realm.
So so I was supposed to speak in this TEDx event, and
Mm.
everything got and finish my book,
Oh,
but everything
yeah.
got canceled because of the corona. So that didn't happen. I'm still working on the book, but right now what I'm working on is creating this new virtual program,
Hmm.
which I call the Mastery Method, and it's really the culmination of this my life's work, if you would, of how
Yeah.
I've created this reproducible results, which I think will shock a lot of people. Some of the things that I focus on in
Hmm.
terms of the components of it, and yet it's very much this holistic approach to being on the journey of mastery. And so I'm really excited about it. So we'll see how that goes, but I'm launching that in the next month or two.
And is that going to be about like the exercises you do, and then also like the methodologies you have? Like how is that going to be like displayed online?
Yeah, so that's a good question. It'll be a little mix of everything. It's not going to be
Hmm.
exercise centric. It's going to be much more process oriented,
Gotcha.
in terms of, like, understand, um, you, like, where are you, and then where do you want to be, and then what is going to be required in terms of the path to get there, if you would, and what's required on the journey, and how to think through this process, and what are the steps required in order to get your lessons that you need to get in this
Hmm.
process, and then how to integrate that all, and how to see things in a different perspective, so that you can have a better understanding and a more holistic approach to your path. And so it's much more holistic, if you would, approach. And it's not going to be focused on the exercise necessarily, but there's going to be exercises within it, so that you can know, kind of, well, how do you build a bigger engine? Well, these would be some of the exercises I would utilize to do that.
Yeah.
Does that
Very
make
cool.
sense? I'm kind of talking in generalities because,
No, no, it
that's
does. I mean, yeah, no, yeah, 'cause it just sounds like what it is. It sounds like a very complex, like it's the real deal kind of a thing. So it's not like a typical. So is this going to be for trainers and coaches to see, or is it going to be mostly for like clients and exercises and all that stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question too, and it's a little bit of both. I'm toying with the idea and of creating a certification, if you would.
I was just going to say that. I was like, are you going to make a certificate? Okay, cool, gotcha. Yeah.
I'm really, like, I'm getting some full court press from a couple of my peers and my
Hmm.
mentors that are like, no, it's time for you to create a certification. And so this program is kind of like the predecessor to it. Like,
Very
the
cool.
concepts that are in this program will certainly be in the certification, but the certification will be a lot more hands-on stuff, which would
Hmm.
be the 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 manual therapy, soft tissue techniques that I've used, the speed, the exercises, the programming, the periodization practices that I utilize, and then, how I think about analytics and getting the data and what to measure, how to measure, how to correlate what with what, and whether it's causative or not, and know what to measure, and how to
Yeah.
think about that process in terms of that, so that you can take the data and be able to now show with accuracy that you do have an impact on this individual's performance. And when you can do that, then you can write your own check a lot of times.
So would that be less of like a NASM and more of like a Wim Hof, whatever his name is, method, where it's kind of like it's not like a certification, it's more of like you're like a franchisee of your mindset. Ooh, that's good. Is that kind of?
That's really good. I like the way you think, because that's kind of, it's kind of a mix of both, because my intent is to get the ICF, I think it is, IFC, International Federation of Coaches. Anyway, I can't remember.
Okay.
There's a certification, international certification that I'm looking to get accredited for the certification. So it would be, in all intents and purposes, similar to NASM or NSCA. However, then there comes the component of the licensing aspect of what it is. You can call yourself a certified whatever. So, because and this is where I'm playing with it right now, because there's just so many different components of what I do, and there's there would be a requirement, I don't necessarily want to be teaching anatomy for an entire year, because I don't think that's the best use of my time. However, if you don't know your anatomy, then learning the soft tissue modalities is not going to help you. And look, there's going to be people that don't really need to know that in terms of the certification side of things. And yet, because a lot of people are afraid to put their hands on their clients, and quite honestly, I've had my hands on my clients for 33 years. So, and that's partly why, again, when you get the reps, you just get better at it, right? And you start to make shifts and do things. And so now I don't create scars or create that stuff on my clients. I just get better results.
Yeah.
But it took a long time for me to get there, right? And so, and it's funny, because it's a process, because even when I teach other coaches right now this process, they still want to do it. It's almost like innate. You think that you gotta push harder, and as the mindset of a lot of us coaches is, we think we have to push harder to get results, but the reality is sometimes you actually have to go push less to get better results. So less is more sometimes, and it's a great mindset. Anyway, to answer your question, it's actually for both. The mastery method is for both. However, I'm really thinking of kicking off a certification program. And if you're listening to this and you're interested in, hit me up and let's talk.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have a name for it? Because the Tim Adams certification, I don't even.
Yeah, I don't, not yet. And I'm most likely not going to put it around my name.
Okay.
Yeah, I've got a couple of different names that I've been using for a while, like this performance cascade, and that I use, and I might do it around that, but I don't know yet for sure what I'm going to call it, because it's going to be holistic in nature.
Well, I'd be excited to interview you post certification, whenever that is, to talk about the process that you took to create a certification. That'll be a good interview.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's very complicated, but if anyone can do it, if anyone can still work out with half a knee for 30 years, it'll be you. So,
yeah.
Cool, Tim. Well, I know you You should have billed me like 40K for this. So I mean, I'm gonna call it good there. Yeah, I'll check my invoice for a bill after this. But Tim, it was really great talking to you again. I'm excited to put this content out there, and then I'll be sure to get all your links, and we'll push those all out on our socials and all that stuff. So,
Awesome.
yeah, any closing remarks, or are we all good?
Yeah, no, I think the last thing I'll say to everybody is, you know, it's a journey. You know, it's not a destination, and the more you can just buy into being on the journey and the roller coaster of what a journey might bring, the dark nights of the soul that it might bring, you know, embrace those, enjoy those, because those are where you're going to get your best lessons. Those are where you're going to get the best learnings and the most growth from. So when it sucks, you should be excited, because on the other side of it sucking is something beautiful. So
Absolutely. Boom. Yeah. Awesome, Tim. All right, Tim, you have an awesome day, and go train all your clients, and stay safe.
All right, take care.